Welcome everybody again to another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Pacheco. Today with me, I have Joe Cohen. Joe provides human capital consulting and leadership coaching. As a leadership coach, he draws upon over a decade of training in various leadership development and personal growth strategies, including seminars with Tony Robbins and Landmark, as well as coursework in internal family systems and conflict resolution and mediation. Joe received his coaching certification from the ICF and a Juris Doctor from Hofstra School of Law. Joe, welcome to the Remarkable Coach.
Michael, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you making time to join us here. As always, I like to open up the podcast by simply inviting our guests to tell us a little bit more about yourself that maybe wasn't in the bio and why you got into coaching.
Okay, so a little bit about me. How far back should I go?
The day I was born.
Yeah, I do human capital consulting, which is kind of like HR strategy. I go into corporations, into businesses, and help them with their hiring, firing, culture building, determining your values, corporate values, employee engagement. I help improve in that area. I also provide leadership training to different organizations and executive coaching. And then in my own coaching practice, I provide business coaching, all forms of coaching. Not really, I don't touch relationships or finances. My niche, my specialty would really be small business startups and one-on-one performance coaching.
Okay, nice.
Welcome.
Yeah. So, I mean, tell us a little bit more about why you got into coaching. Like, what was it that really drew you? You've got a JD, in like a law degree, right?
Right.
So what drew you either away from that or into coaching?
I was in my first year of law school and it sucked. I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. I did a lot of soul searching at the time. I know that was kind of late in the game. I should have done it before law school. So I really did a lot of work on determining what my strengths are, what's my personality type. And I went through a program where someone asked me, if you had $50 million and you had to work 8 hours a day, what would you do? And I said, well, I would help people actualize their potential through consulting and coaching. I was already coaching before that, but it was more of a part-time thing. And with the amount of energy I spoke with and passion and other factors, he helped me realize that maybe that's the right thing for you to do.
Yeah.
So I did more research, and that's how I got to where I'm at now.
Nice.
A lot of training, research, working with hundreds of clients, and I love it.
Yeah. Following your heart.
Yes.
Right on. Tell us more about your clients. Who is your typical or ideal client that you work with? You mentioned small businesses and that sort of thing. Are there specific niches within that, or?
No, the principles that I teach are industry agnostic. I work with mid-level managers, C-suite executives in large corporations, but I also work with small business owners, real estate investors, people from all different industries.
Nice. What does a typical engagement with you look like? In
terms of the length, the cadence?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above.
Usually we start with a minimum of 3 months, consistent meeting once a week. And it depends on the type of client I'm working with, whether they are an employee or a business owner. There's a different program for each. But what applies to everyone is really figuring out where you're at, where you want to be, figuring out the gap, figuring out your vision, your goals, reverse engineering it, figuring out what mindset issues might be getting in the way, helping you with the I guess process mastery, taking consistent action steps, figuring out also, do we need to work on your emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence would be self-awareness, social awareness, emotional regulation, relationship management. So there's a lot of different things we could work on. If we're working with employees, managers, a lot of times they use a DISC assessment. I'm certified in both.
Sure.
And you're probably very familiar with that. But for the listeners, the DISC is to help you determine your communication style. For example, are you a high D, which is more of a dominant style? Are you a high I, which is more of a influencer? You love to be around people. So there are different types, and having self-awareness around your type will help you be a better leader and just better team player.
Yeah. So the DISC, the way I like to think about it, and maybe you have something to add to this, but I like to think about it like it kind of just helps you with a little more self-awareness. You can learn quite a bit more about yourself and what kind of situations you might thrive in, and what kind of situations you might approach differently.
I love that you said self-awareness, and there's a phrase that I like to use, which is what you're aware of, you're in control of. What you're not aware of is in control of you. And when you're aware of it, you're free of it. It's there, but you're not affected by it. I think self-awareness is the most important thing.
Yeah. How do you, so short of, let's riff on that a little bit, right? Short of having someone take a DISC assessment. Well, let me rephrase that. If you have someone take a DISC assessment, how do you use that to work with them and help improve their self-awareness? How do you work with people to increase their own self-awareness?
Great question. So I'll discuss how do you do it with the DISC and the EI, Emotional Intelligence Report. And also, what if you don't have access to that, right? So most people probably have gotten constructive feedback in the past. You can ask your friends, your family members for constructive feedback. That doesn't always work because a lot of times people don't feel comfortable giving constructive feedback to you. They don't want to rock the boat, as they say, right? That's one way. With the DISC and emotional intelligence, there's data there. It's very accurate, and it shows you what your blind spots are. It shows you there's strengths, but there's also weaknesses to everything in life. So we discuss, what does this resonate with you? Maybe sometimes you act like this. You're a high C, which means you're very conscientious, but a lot of times the high Cs within the DISC profile, they tend to be more perfectionists. They also tend to avoid conflict. So that could be a blind spot, and that could also be a weakness, but also it's a positive in a lot of ways to be a high C, because you look at data, you're very analytical, right? As opposed to the high Ds, they're great at decision making. They don't avoid conflict. They'll step right into it. However, they could be too forceful. They might come off with a little too aggressive. So that could be a blind spot. That could be a weakness. So that's how it shows up.
Yeah. And you can kind of help walk them through that and, basically analyze the data that comes back from the DISC.
Absolutely.
So for the one resource that I'll throw in here, and we'll include this in the show notes, is I know Tony Robbins has a free DISC assessment on his website. I think it's tonyrobbins.com/DISC, and that's it. It's a DISC. C is in cat, not with a K. Yeah. So, that might be a place where if for our listeners and viewers, if you guys are curious about this, you can go and check out that Tony Robbins test. And then let's move on to the emotional intelligence. Talk a little bit about that and how that kind of, if there's any interplay there with the DISC assessment and how that all kind of comes back to this self-awareness.
Emotional intelligence is a very hot topic now, and there are many different assessments out there. The one that I use is through MHS. They're a company out in Canada, and they break it up into like 20 different competencies. So one could be empathy, one could be assertiveness, So for example, if someone shows up high with empathy and the score is from, let's say, a 70 to 120, they're a 120 for empathy, but 80 for assertiveness, what kind of leader do you think they're going to be? How do you think they're going to show up? How are their colleagues going to perceive them? Like super sweet, friendly, I can go to you with all my problems, but the boundaries are going to be blurred. And maybe sometimes they're not going to be able to get things done. So the converse is also true. High assertiveness, low empathy, they might come off as a tyrant, right? And not empathetic. So there's a lot of great data there, and it really gives you like a X-ray of your emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Are you able to, and maybe this is built into your coaching programs, are you able to then work with your clients and help them either double down on their strengths, right? Amplify their strengths, or work on their weaknesses, so that, for example, right, high assertiveness, low empathy. And if you're in a leadership position with high assertiveness and low empathy, you could totally come across as a tyrant. I'm pretty sure I've known some people like that before. I think we all probably have. Are you able to work with your clients then in a situation like that to help, I guess, optimize, right, who they are and how they work with people and work with relationships around them?
Absolutely. What I like to do is figure out, I like how you said, do we optimize your strengths? Is that the verbiage that you use? Maybe
amplify the strength.
Amplify right? The strengths. Yeah. So I definitely would amplify the strengths, and I would only work on the weaknesses if it's applicable.
Yeah.
So if it is, assertiveness and empathy is always applicable, but there's a lot of other areas that are not so applicable. And normally we'll just figure out like a 3-month game plan. I'll give them a lot of exercises they can use and apply it in the workplace, and then we'll discuss it in our conversations.
Would you talk a little bit about that? What kind of exercises do you give to your clients to work on this sort of thing?
Well, I guess let's go with the example of if someone showed up with low empathy, right? A leader. I would say, just discussing different examples. One time, a client of mine, he told me that he saw one of his colleagues walk into his boss's office to talk about some important meeting, and the boss said that everyone knew that the boss's cat just died, and the cat was part of her family. So he did not acknowledge that. He just jumped into it, said, well, hey, Mrs. Susan, can we talk about the project, or can we talk about the raise? Right. So pointing things out like that, it's a lack of empathy. Or your employee, your direct report, father just passed away. Like, give them time, be empathetic to what they might be dealing with. Give them time to go through that grieving process. Or if they showed up late to work, instead of, if it's consistent, instead of yelling at them, being passive aggressive with them, maybe check in with them, ask them how they're doing, what's going on.
Sure. Just acknowledge the person before dealing with the employee a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Cool. How do you find your clients? How do you market yourself as a coach?
I have not marketed myself yet. I would like to start creating some content, some maybe podcasts and YouTube videos to make a bigger impact and put myself out there. But so far, clients have come from referrals.
Nice. That's great. How did you get your first client? How did you get the ball rolling, so to speak?
My first client was a friend he was a friend of mine. We weren't close friends, but we knew of each other. And I said, hey, this is what I can offer you. And I gave him a really good deal. And then we worked together for like 2 years, and I raised the prices every, I don't know, quarter. And he was really happy.
That's great. That's great. That's a classic. Yeah, that's a classic way for any new coaches out there that may be listening. You know, give someone a good deal in exchange for some help and a testimonial.
That's right. That's right.
You want to get
now I have a video testimonial of him on my website. So
yep, there you go. Those testimonials are gold.
Yeah.
So speaking of you know, new coaches, Joe, what sort of things did you struggle with when you first started out?
As a coach?
As a coach, yeah.
I would say being comfortable putting myself out there.
Okay. Yeah. In terms of like marketing your services,
in terms of marketing, to be transparent, being comfortable when I'm in conversations in groups and it comes up like, hey, what do you do?
You know, owning that new identity.
Yeah. I had a hard time owning that in the beginning.
Yeah. And how did you end up overcoming that?
Really focusing on the amount of value that I provide to my clients.
Yep.
Thank God I have over 50 testimonials on my website, and that's a fraction of them. And a lot of those people, I've had a big impact on their lives. People have cried to me and thanked me for changing their lives around. So having that in mind, the impact that I'm having on people's lives, like this is something to be proud of, right? So that's what I keep in mind. Like I'm doing great work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I was having a conversation with someone else earlier today, and I was telling him a story that I'll share here as well. I have a sales coach that told me not, you know, maybe 2 months ago, that I struggle with that myself, with owning my power and kind of selling my services. And what they told me is if you truly and honestly believe that you can help someone and you don't tell them that you can help them and you can help them get to where they want to go, to help them solve a problem, then you're doing them a disservice because they want that problem solved. They're actively seeking to solve that problem. And if you truly believe that you can help them, it's your moral obligation to put yourself out there. Is it more uncomfortable? And his response was, is it worth helping someone if all it means is you have to feel a little bit uncomfortable? Which I thought was a great way to kind of frame that in terms of, you know, feeling uncomfortable putting yourself out there.
If we had enough time, I'll do some role play with you to on that specific topic. But yeah, I could help you in that area. Not that you need it, but if you wanted to discuss it.
I love it. Yeah.
I mean, it's because the same principles apply. I have coaches that are clients, and the same principles would apply. For example, is it okay if we go off and go on this for a second?
It's your podcast, my brother.
Just to provide some value, because I think if there are a lot of coaches, it could be anybody. It doesn't really matter what you do. If you believe in what you're doing and you're helping people, these ideas would help. So I had a client who was a coach. Unfortunately, she was amazing in what she did. I don't want to give too many details, but she was amazing in what she did. Sure. And she was great at the influence. She had charisma. She had emotional intelligence. People liked her. They trust her. The process part of it, she wasn't executing the advice that I would give her in terms of marketing, getting clients. She wasn't taking any actions at all. The mindset piece, she was okay, but she wasn't able to bring in business, and her mindset was also spilling over, impacting how she would take action.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she had to go get a 9-to-5 job, and it's a soul-sucking job. She doesn't like what she does. She's not showing up with passion. She's not showing up to her family with passion. She doesn't have time to spend with her kids. So if she had someone like you, for example, because I know you're great at what you do, and you're able to help her, you're not just helping her, you're also impacting her family. You could be saving her marriage. You could, and because of what the type of coaching she does, she's making an impact. So it has a ripple effect.
Yeah, that's great. This is that speaks to a lot of things in why I choose to do what I do, and why, we talk about this at our team meetings at Boxer every week, right? It's for us, it's the second and third order effects and fourth order effects, right? It's that ripple effect that you mentioned.
Yeah.
As a marketing agency, there's only so much that we can do to directly impact someone's life. But if we can help coaches get the word out and improve leadership, improve vulnerability, they're making changes in companies, which trickles down to families, which expands to communities, right? I mean, this is stuff that really makes a big difference in society because of that ripple effect, and the way that it, it's like the lead domino, right? If you can knock over that lead domino, all the other ones are just going to naturally fall. And that's, that's something to be proud of, right?
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about identity. Talk some more about that. I think you've got a lot to say about that.
Okay. Identity in terms of how you perceive yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think identity is the most important thing in life.
Yep.
Right. How you perceive yourself. And most of us don't know who we are. And I've been on a journey myself. And I've done a lot of work on myself to start being more authentic, less concerned about judgment. And I'll get into that if we have time for that. But I would say there's some ideas regarding like identity shifting, right? Think about the Michelangelo piece, the famous sculpture, right? And you could help me out. I'm going to botch it up. But Michelangelo basically carved around it, right? Is that chiseled around the rocks or the rock?
Yeah. So you're talking about David, the statue of David.
Statue of David.
And I think the famous quote that I think you might be driving at is that the statue's already in there. He just has to chip away the excess.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So same thing with us. We just got to chip away the bad behaviors, the limiting beliefs, right? Identify the trauma. I have a lot of, I'm not a victim. I don't see myself that way, but things happened to me when I was young. And there's trauma that people have experienced that they're not even aware of. They never process. So you got to dig deep, identify that trauma, because just saying affirmations and thinking positive is not going to be sufficient. I would say it's helpful. It's great. You should do it, but it's not sufficient. So there's a lot of things you got to do. You have to do a lot of deeper work on yourself to identify the real you. And it's a lot of work, but I think that is the core. That's the most important thing to focus on.
Why is it so important to rewrite old stories that don't serve you? Does that make sense?
It's so obvious to me. I don't even know where to start. And there's a lot of things that I take for granted that I don't even tell my clients. I don't tell people. I'm like, of course you would know this, but why is it, to recap your question, why is it important to rewrite the stories? Right? Yeah. Okay.
The stories, and specifically the stories that aren't serving you. Right. So again, you're talking about trauma. Right. And that trauma may lead to a self-imposed narrative about yourself that has implied self-limiting beliefs and like all this other stuff that stacks on.
Let me tell you how it plays in my life to be vulnerable. So in my life, I'll give you one example out of 1,000 that have happened to me. I remember we moved around a lot. I went to 3 different military schools, boarding schools.
Mm-hmm.
And at around 11 years old, we lived in California. My wonderful mom, she's a survivor. She's amazing, but her hands were tied. She had it tough. She was a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent me away to live with another family on the East Coast. Good family, but I got sent away at a young age. And I bounced around a lot very early.
Mm-hmm.
So at that stage in life, I don't remember what I thought,
mm-hmm.
but it's very possible that I learned this in therapy and intense men's groups and in other ways, that there's probably a little boy, there's probably that little part of me that feels like he wasn't important.
100%. Yeah.
Probably feels unworthy. Is that, you agree with that?
Yeah.
So if I didn't rewrite that story, I'm taking that into my present life.
Mm-hmm. And
how's that going to show up in my relationship, in my business, with friends? Hey, I'm just making this up. I call my friend. He didn't call me back for 2 days. I'm not important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy. I go into a event. I go to a wedding. People don't say hi to me. They don't smile at me. I'm looking at the world through my blurred vision, my own lens, right?
Yep.
Through I'm not important lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I walk out. I leave. That's the importance of rewriting your story.
Yeah.
But most people, Michael, don't even know they need to rewrite their stories.
It's true.
And that's why self-awareness is the foundation of everything.
Most people don't even realize that they have those stories, or that those stories are rewritable, right? That it's even an option to redefine these self-imposed beliefs that come from childhood,
Can I get a little bit more personal with you?
By all means.
Okay. So I was in therapy for a couple of years with a few different therapists. They identified, okay, you got PTSD, no psychiatric disorders, no other issues, never been depressed, but I had trauma that I never would acknowledge. And then I tried something called psychedelic therapy. And I filmed myself doing it. And on that film, it showed that I was expressing a lot of emotions.
Uh-huh.
I was crying for the first time. When my brother was killed and he was stabbed 5 times when I was 18, I didn't cry at his funeral. I was Mr. Tough Guy for my mom. When I went through all the things I went through in life, being jumped by skinheads or whatever it was, like it was just about taking revenge and being a tough guy. I never processed anything. I cried like a baby for probably 10 minutes on that video. And I did another form of psychedelic therapy called ketamine with a wonderful organization called the Neshama Clinic in Manhattan. And the doctor told me, you were crying. You're emoting. That's the words they used. Sure. More than normal. I have over 40 years of emotions to release. And that's not something I was aware of. So imagine, let me ask you, like, how do you think that would have impacted me? How do you think that's impacted me in life? I dropped a lot of that emotional weight, but how do you think that was impacting me?
I suspect it opened up a lot of doors. In inner space doors, right? Yeah, I mean, I've done a program. There weren't psychedelics involved in this program, but it was essentially a group coaching program for men who also, for family men who also owned businesses. And we did a big week-long retreat, and I'm actually under NDA, so I can't get into the specifics of it about what all took place there, but I can say that there was a lot of tears. And I did this last August.
Wow.
41 years old. I did it last August for the first time. And it took me 41 years to realize that one of my big stories was about abandonment from my father. And my mother was also a single mom, and my dad took off, I think, when I was 6 or 7 years old. They had joint custody up until then, and I didn't really see him again after that. And I had this story in my head that I wasn't good enough, right? Same kind of thing. And my wife was pregnant at the time. Our daughter was born on March 1st, and she's amazing. She's wonderful. And that going into that program, I was terrified to be a dad because I didn't want to fuck up the same way that my dad did. Yeah. And and so what that did, I mean, for me, I can't, you asked me, what that maybe did for you. So I'm just trying to put it into terms that I can understand and telling you about what happened with me. It just, going into that weekend, I didn't know that whole week, that whole retreat was going to be about my father. I had no clue that was the thing for me. And the brilliant coaches that we were working with there at The Powerful Man, where they got us through that. And it was absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't be happier to be a dad right now. I'm so excited about fatherhood. My daughter's amazing. And that story is rewritten now because I found the self-awareness, because I realized the story. I acknowledged it. And once I did the deep work of acknowledging that story, at that point, I could access it with my logical brain and be like, that's ridiculous. And it was easy to rewrite the story, but I had to get it up to the surface, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to just say, I honor you for doing that deep work.
No, it was not easy, and it wasn't fun.
No, but that's great that you did that. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah. I didn't have a father growing up either, so I can resonate with that. Yeah.
It's the rewriting is really, I mean, for me at least, that was the easy part, because once I got that story to the surface, I could just see, like, logically it was a ridiculous story. Yeah. It had none of that had anything to do with me.
Well, you're one of the lucky few that once it came up, you're able to identify that, because a lot of people that I work with, they're aware of it. Thankfully, we create that self-awareness, but they need to constantly remind themselves of it, because it does drift away. And our lower selves, we have a good side and a bad side. Whatever you want to call it, it does want us to forget for some reason.
So let's talk a little bit about your coaching techniques, if you would, and tell us a little bit about what kind of techniques do you use to help people remind themselves to stay in their power, and to remind themselves of, a new narrative that is empowering and not restricting.
It depends on who I'm working with. I have a big toolbox of strategies. One thing that I like to do is I imported a tool from CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, something called the ABC thought log. Okay. And basically, I have a lot of my clients do this every morning or with every situation. part of the routine is starting off with self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel when you wake up or throughout the day? If there's a situation that happened that caused you to be anxious, let's identify the event, activate an event, right? What's the emotional consequence? I feel anxious. What's the belief? Well, my boss did not respond to me in over 2 weeks about my request for a raise. So that's the belief. That's actually a fact. The belief is, I'm sorry. The belief is, I'm not going to get a raise. They don't like me.
Right.
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 So how do we weaken that? Because it's causing you to become anxious, which impacts your productivity, how efficient you are. We weaken it. How do we weaken it? We ask questions. Is there any evidence to cast doubt on that belief? Name some evidence. Are there alternative possibilities? Another question. Is this belief extreme? Right? There's a whole list of questions that I take my clients through, and then identify the cognitive distortion. What I mean by cognitive distortion, just for the viewers, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, magnifying. So I'm making, a mountain out of a molehill. Mind reading. If someone's not smiling to me, they're not talking to me, they seem a little tough around the edges, I'm reading their mind. They don't like me. So I'm going to mirror that. I'm going to reflect that. So the list goes on.
But you really,
that's one tool.
So part of it sounds like part of what you're really teaching people is just, you got to give people the benefit of the doubt. Not everyone's dislikes you. Not everyone's out to get you.
Sure. There's
just everyone out there in the world has their own thing going on. They've got their own problems that they're dealing with.
Sure.
For the wedding example you used before, if you go to a wedding and someone doesn't say hi to you, they're probably just catching up with someone else that they haven't seen in years, because people meet at weddings and they haven't seen each other in years and years.
Right.
You got to give the benefit of the doubt sometime.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other things. I kind of read, it depends on my client. I have some clients, they're not compassionate enough to themselves. They don't show empathy to themselves. So it really depends on what their challenges are. And then I kind of custom tailor strategies that's best for them.
I like it. Joe, I want to be respectful of your time here. We're coming up on the top of the hour. Tell us about your mastermind group.
Yeah, I have a mastermind group for business owners. So we meet bi-monthly, twice a month, and there's accountability, there's strategies, peer support, and that's what that looks like.
Where can people go to learn more about that?
They can go to my website to learn more about me and about everything that I offer, and that's 40pillars.com. That's the number 40. Then pillars, PILLARS.com.
40pillars.com. We'll include that link in the show notes as well. Joe, one more thing. Where can our viewers and listeners connect with you online? Obviously, your website, 40pillars.com. Are you on social media, LinkedIn, that sort of thing?
I am. I guess I'm going to have to ask you to put some of the links in the interview, because I don't remember the names.
Can do.
Well, I'm not so active, but I need to become more active this year.
Yeah. We'll connect with you offline and get those links, and we'll add those to the show notes.
Thank you.
That's what I got. Joe Cohen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this. This has been a great conversation.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you. And thank you to our viewers and listeners. This has been the Remarkable Coach Podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.
Cheers.